It is my distinct pleasure to welcome all of you to the World Bladder Cancer Patient Forum. Bladder cancer is a disease that does not recognize country borders and is a global crisis. It is so gratifying to be here and see so many people who share our vision of working to ensure the best possible outcomes for patients all over the world. I'm excited to begin and expecting an energetic and inspiring program. For those of you who might not know, the World Bladder Cancer Patient Coalition was established in January 2019 by a group of dedicated patient advocates from 3 major national bladder cancer organizations who saw the need for a global solution to a global problem. They were Fight Bladder Cancer in the UK, Bladder Cancer Canada, and Bladder Cancer Advocacy Network in the USA. As some of you may know, the strength of the World Bladder Cancer Patient Coalition is its ability to bring together an international team of people passionate about helping bladder cancer. What began as a team of 3 has since expanded to 11 patient organizations from 4 continents. This amazing coalition constitutes the first time that bladder cancer patients have a worldwide group representing their interests. The missions of the World Bladder Cancer Patient Coalition, next slide please, is to foster an international community of people affected by bladder cancer, advocate for access to the best bladder cancer information, support and care, and build alliances with health professionals, policymakers, academics, researchers, and industry. We want to elevate the global voice of those who have been impacted by bladder cancer, a disease that affects more than 1.7 million patients worldwide. Our vision is bold: to have a bladder cancer patient organization in every single country. This is ambitious, but I think what you will see today is the drive, energy, and enthusiasm demonstrated by everyone who is part of that vision. It is certainly an honor for me to be part of it. In my role as Chief Executive of Fight Bladder Cancer, I have looked in the eyes of bladder cancer patients and those who love them and have seen the pain that this disease inflicts upon them. I have shared stories, hugs, and tears with them and heard their consistent pleas for more and better research, education, and support. With this, the inaugural World Bladder Cancer Patient Forum, it inspires me to know that as a disease that impacts people all over the world, bladder cancer is being confronted on a global basis. I hope that you are all ready for what will be a great day. I know that I am. Next slide, please. So my name is Dr. Lydia Makaroff, and I am the president of the World Bladder Cancer Patient Coalition and the chief executive of Fight Bladder Cancer here in the UK. We've got a very exciting agenda today. So we begin with session 1, patient centricity from research to care, with some great presentations and discussions. Then we will talk about this new survey, which will be launched very soon, on capturing bladder cancer patient experience around the world. And then our second session, patient advocacy, sharing knowledge, driving change, will feature 3 inspiring patients who are doing amazing projects in their own countries. We'll then have a summary and conclusion from Alex Felichevus, the Executive Director of the World Bladder Cancer Patient Coalition, and then virtual networking. And the World Bladder Cancer Patient Forum 2021 is proudly supported by our premium partners, Astellas and Seagen, and our sponsors Roche, Bristol Myers Squibb, Pfizer, and Merck EMD Serono. The content of this event remains the sole responsibility of the World Bladder Cancer Patient Coalition. Next slide, please. Housekeeping rules. So to your right, you can see the stage chat here. So you can absolutely see here are the different comments that have come through the chat. So feel free to ask any questions to any of the presenters at any time with the chat. We also have some interesting polls that will pop up as well. So keep the lookout for polls, and you can share information about you and what you're looking for, and we can get to know each other through this forum. And a very exciting feature is what we call speed networking. So after the event, we invite you to stay on. I will certainly be staying on, and you will be randomly matched with someone else who has just watched the webinar, and you can have a 3-minute chat. You can exchange your contact details, and you can start to help us continue to build this international bladder cancer community. And please join the conversation on social media using the hashtag Bladder Cancer Forum. I've got my Twitter open over here, and so I will also be watching all of your comments on Twitter, hashtag Bladder Cancer Forum. So let's get started. The first session is patient centricity from research to care. So we will have a presentation, a 10-minute presentation, and then we will have a panel discussion after that. So to kick off our first presentation, we have Dr. Ashish Kamat, who will be speaking about patient involvement in bladder cancer research. He is a professor of urologic oncology at the MD Anderson Cancer Center and has done some really extraordinary work ensuring that there is excellent and meaningful patient involvement in bladder cancer research. Dr. Kamat, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for that introduction, and thank you for the privilege of being part of this inaugural World Bladder Cancer Forum 2021. When we talk about patient involvement in bladder cancer research, the key critical question is, what are we talking about, right? And next slide, please. If you really look to see what patient involvement in research is, it's been defined by multiple organizations. And I think one of the more eloquent distinctions as to what is public engagement, what is patient engagement, is put forth in this little graphic. Involvement in research is research carried out with or by members of the public, in this case patients, rather than to the patients or about the patients or for patients. And it includes obviously patients, potential patients, even caregivers and advocates, of course. The involvement of patients in research is not just raising awareness of the study, which is really a very important part, but not the only part. And it's definitely not just about study recruitment, which is a common misperception that a lot of people have. Next slide, please. So, an example is the whole definition of the different disease states when it comes to managing patients with muscle invasive and non muscle invasive bladder cancer. Many of you are aware that there was a paucity of any approved drug in the BCG unresponsive space. So, the space where patients get BCG immunotherapy and unfortunately still have high grade tumor that occurs in the bladder. This space was poorly understood, not well defined, until two large groups came together and came up with definitions. Click, please. And this definition was adopted by the FDA under the banner BCG unresponsive non-muscle invasive bladder cancer in about 2018. Next slide. So this led to an explosion of clinical studies, and you can see here that there was a large number of studies that were performed in this space. Most of these studies, I'll be honest with you, I was part of the design, and there weren't really patient representatives on these study design panels. So there were clearly patients who were consulted after the fact, or folks that were patient advocates that were involved in the design of the studies, but not actual patients. So there was no patient focus group, there was no actual involvement of patients, not because people didn't want to have patient involved, but that was not considered the standard practice. And in many countries, people actually didn't know how to go about this. They didn't have the blueprint for this. Next slide. So, of course, it's a great paradigm to have a single arm study and to allow approval of drugs. And one of the drugs that did get approved through a well performed study in this space was pembrolizumab, the Keynote 57. And you can see here the results that led to the approval of pembrolizumab. So, bottom line numbers, 40% of patients that are treated with this drug do achieve a CR at 3 months, and the median duration of response is about 16.2 months. So, from a scientific perspective, from a regulatory perspective, this is significant. 40% of patients getting a response and the median duration being more than a year is meaningful. However, when we then subsequently talk to patients, the questions we often get from our patients are logical ones. It's like, well, doctor, if I have a 40% chance of responding, I have a 60% chance of not responding. Why would I be trying something that could potentially have toxicity if the majority percentage is a non-response? A valid question. But the more valid question is when patients say, well, even if I respond, I agree that the median duration of response is better than anything else that has come before, but it's still less than a year and a half. It's less than 2 years. So am I going to be talking to you again next year about needing to have my bladder taken out? Next slide. The comparison is a non-approved combination, which has not been studied, not gone through regulatory approval, which is gemcitabine and docetaxel, which is not approved, but has numbers that appear to be higher, at least in retrospective studies. And patients will say, well, if I have this non-approved regimen, why is this not being studied in a prospective manner? Why is this not being the control arm? So these are, again, questions that if we as a group had sought out the patient voice early on, we would have been able to use this into the design of the clinical studies and come up with the questions that are relevant to the patients and their caregivers and others that are involved in the management of bladder cancer per se. Next slide. So, if you look at how to involve patients in clinical research, classically the paradigm has been after the study. So, what you see on the right side of the screen there, we've always sought patients out to help disseminate results and inform other participants about study results. Obviously, we assess patient experiences, but this is often done after the research has been conducted. It's important to recognize that we actually need to have patients involved before the study, identify research priorities, help in designing the clinical trials. During the study, too, patients should be part of the ongoing effort where we look at adequate information about the study, improving the study endpoints, revising the study as it is ongoing as well. Next slide. Next slide, please. So again, just as an example of two organizations that have actually adopted this paradigm, one is, of course, Beacon, which is the Bladder Cancer Advocacy Network in the US, and PCORI, which is a Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. Next slide. And as an example of one of the studies that was done is actually a patient survey. So bladder cancer patients were surveyed. They were asked to prioritize their questions for different disease states. This is just an example of non-muscle invasive bladder cancer, where patients said, well, they want to have research done in decision making for bladder removal. They want to have research done in treatments for BCG failure, biomarkers for treatment response, pain reduction with cystoscopy and intravesical therapy, methods for smoking cessation. Next slide. For muscle invasive bladder cancer, the questions that were important were selection for neoadjuvant chemotherapy, comparing cystectomy with bladder preservation, comparing the different diversions, treatment for sexual rehabilitation. And next slide. In the metastatic arena, it was actually comparative effectiveness of new treatments, the sequence of treatments. This was a question that was very important to patients in the survey. How do we improve education about clinical trials? And importantly, and this is something that clearly we needed to hear from our patients, is ways to decrease caregiver burden. And again, this is a matter of research that had not yet been sort of recognized by the research community. Next slide. So, one example again of the trial that is called Sisto is looking exactly at the question that we got from the patients. And this is a trial that is led by John Gore and Angie Smith here in the US. It is looking at patients who are faced with a decision on bladder sparing versus radical cystectomy and simply ask patients the question, what led to your decision about choosing option A versus option B? And we're obviously going to be collecting the quality of life as the primary outcomes, and then you can see there the secondary outcomes. And the results from the study are actually going to be very useful in helping us design clinical studies, not just about drugs or interventions, but actually quality of life. What matters? Is it the 12-month duration that's relevant? Clearly it is from a scientific perspective, but does it mean much to the patient for herself or himself when they're looking at the results? Next slide. So again, just a reminder, we all know that bladder cancer requires a multidisciplinary approach. It's not just the urologist or the surgeon, the pharmacist, the medical oncologist, the nurses, the radiation oncologist. It is really focused around the patient, and the patient clearly needs to be part of that multidisciplinary approach from the very get-go. Next slide. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention and looking forward to an exciting panel discussion.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kamat. It's a really very inspiring presentation. When you talk about research and you talk to other clinicians who believe that perhaps they don't have time to have the patient voice, that the pace of research is happening so quickly that perhaps we just need to move forward and perhaps not take the time to ask patients what their priorities are. What would you say to them about those to those researchers?
That's such a relevant question. I'm glad you asked it right off the bat. The key thing to remember there, and what I tell all my collaborators and fellow researchers, that if you don't stop now to take the time to find out what is relevant, you'll have invested a lot of time in a study that might not mean anything to anybody that actually is the subject of the treatment. So stop, take the time, hear what's relevant to the patients, and incorporate that in the study, because not only will it make the study a better study, but you don't run the risk of having a study that's completed that is completely irrelevant to the folks that are looking for treatment.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And I think that this is an excellent theme to launch our panel now. So thank you very much, Dr. Kamat, for sharing that very uplifting presentation with us. I would now like to welcome our panel speakers. So we have Susan Mullerworth from the United Kingdom, who is a bladder cancer patient and advocate. We have Lauren Torres from South Africa, the CEO for Campaigning for Cancer, who is one of the members of the World Bladder Cancer Patient Coalition. Dr. Maria Rivas in the USA, the Senior Vice President, Head of Global Medical Affairs at Merck EMD Serono. Natalie Baer from the Netherlands, who works in patient engagement at the European Medicines Agency. And Dr. Bente Toft Janssen, who is from Denmark, who is the chair of the bladder cancer group at the European Association of Urology Nurses. And so I have the same question for all. I will start with Susan. Susan, how do you work to help industry and researchers incorporate the patient voice into the work that you do?
Hello, thank you. I'm very privileged and honoured to be here today. So from my position, I'm very keen to promote patient involvement and the patient voice. I'm keen to provide insights, patient modelling and patient data. I am included on advisory board discussions with pharmaceutical companies and assisting market research programs, also assisting clinical trials, obviously involved heavily with Fight Bladder Cancer UK, where I will attend community champion meetings. I've recently helped to review the Fight Bladder Cancer website and its content, and I will give talks. I also write articles for Fight Bladder Cancer magazines and other cancer-related magazines. I feel that I'm always learning and I'm extending knowledge, and I'm able to network, and now to network the worldwide cancer community. A patient advocate helps patients communicate with their healthcare providers so they get information they need to make decisions about their health. I like to feel that I'm assisting to improve outcomes for all cancer patients, also to collaborate, align and develop joint projects and actions. I can help to strengthen cancer advocacy throughout the world and to share workload where there is a contribution to different stakeholder activities, and also to provide resources for cancer patient organisations.
Thank you so much, Susan. Lauren, how do you incorporate the patient voice at Campaigning for Cancer?
Thanks, Lydia. For Campaigning for Cancer, the patient voice forms the foundation of our organisation, and any plans or projects that we have are built on those patients. So we run a patient advisory board that makes sure that patients are speaking to stakeholders, and particularly bladder cancer patients, in terms of the Bladder Cancer Advisory Board, and ensuring that their voice is added into any of the policy work that we do, as well as in reimbursement discussions and access. We also look at understanding what are some of the challenges by speaking to patients on various platforms like social media, and doing patient events and forums where we can understand and get them to share their stories and some of the challenges. And then take those learnings and incorporate it. And because we're an organization that deals with all cancers, we are very specific when we look, not losing the fact that patients with different types of cancers have different needs. So we're constantly putting that tailored and unique and niched voice into those diseases like bladder cancer, because they are all different. So we run siloed approaches, but also then changing approaches and looking at learnings. Each one of our projects is a result of engagement that we've had with patients. And to say that each one of our advocacy engagements and dialogues with stakeholders are as a result of things that we've picked up for patients, and also being able to say to patients, what would have made your journey easier? Where were the gaps and how can we fix those?
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Lauren. And now I have the same question for Dr. Maria Rivas, who is the Chief Medical Officer at Merck MD Serono. How do you incorporate the patient voice in your work?
Yeah, no, Lydia, great question. So from the industry perspective, the pharmaceutical perspective, I can tell you that if we at Merck Merck KGaA EMD Serono have adopted a patient-directed approach in everything we do, from how we target specific areas for research, where we know we've partnered with patient advocates and identified, not just with the patients, but their caregivers, that there is a huge unmet need, to also all the way to how we help patients be educated on the disease and get hopefully the best outcomes when they use our treatments once they're approved, and anything in between. So we partner with patient advocates and organizations to ensure that patients are educated about opportunities, like Dr. Kamat mentioned, on clinical research. We partner on how we communicate the results of that research, to make sure that they're understood in plain language by patients who want to see what the outcome of these studies was ultimately about. And also, we know that a lot of the interaction is now digital. So we are very mindful at our company to keep things extremely ethical and appropriate when we engage with patients. It really has to be in the patient's best interest. So we have probably one of the I think it's very unique in the industry, a digital ethics advisory board that includes the patient's perspectives. So there are patient members in this digital ethics advisory board. So it's an external board, and they advise our company on matters where we want to engage with patients, and we want to make sure we're doing it in the right way, respectfully. So those are some of the examples, and I could give you so much many more.
That's really wonderful. It's fantastic to see so many concrete examples of how you're incorporating the patient voice and how that's improving and accelerating your work in innovative products. So that's really very interesting. And then moving from the manufacturer to the regulatory agency, we now have Natalie Baird, patient engagement at the European Medicines Agency. How do you incorporate the patient voice in your work?
Thank you, Lydia, and good afternoon. A pleasure to be here to share a bit our work with you. So at EMA now, the patient's voice or working with patients is really an integrated part of everyday activities. This is something that we've developed over many years. 25 years ago, we started some informal dialogue, and then we developed together with the patients and the organizations various different methodologies for engaging with them. They are now members of our management board, members of our committees, so full voting members. We also established a patients and consumers working party with European patient organizations, and we meet together 4 times a year and discuss, lots of different topics about medicines of common interest. And then when we are actually evaluating the new medicines to decide whether or not they're safe and effective, then we also involve individual patients with experience of the particular condition. And this can be whether they come to a committee meeting, it might be a smaller expert meeting, it might be getting their feedback on a questionnaire to understand their views on the potential risks and what they're willing to accept in terms of benefits. It might just be asking them to review the package leaflets or safety communications, things like that. So they're involved what we call along the whole regulatory life cycle. So in pre-submission activities, when companies come and ask for advice on the development plan, so on the design of the clinical trial. We have them involved. And I remember last year we had one specifically on a new bladder cancer treatment, and he was able to join the meeting and share his views of having the condition and what he felt about the potential safety issues, as well as the population that was being chosen for the trial. So it's really tangible impacts having them in, and of course we're every day trying to further expand that. As we mentioned earlier, we need to move with new digital things happening, how we're going to take data from wearables, from things like that. So always trying to work together with the patients to further increase. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And we do have Dr. Kamat, Ashish here. So I do have a question for you as well. How do you bring the various bladder cancer stakeholders together in your work? We've heard from many different perspectives. How do we make sure that we're all working together to improve outcomes for bladder cancer patients?
So it's very important to recognize that we have to reach out to bladder cancer patients, but also, like you said, the various stakeholders. And the best way to do that, I've found, is to get involved in patient advocacy groups early on. And this is just advice to investigators and those that are designing clinical studies. And we've been doing this since 2003, so for many, many years. There's obviously hurdles that you face both at a local regulatory level, organizational level. Something quite as simple as having that voice heard on IRBs or clinical recruitment packets. There's often the misconception that if a person hasn't been trained in the field, they may actually be adding more confusion to the study. So dispelling those misconceptions sometimes takes a lot of initial groundwork. But once that's done, and whichever group it is sees the benefit of actually having the stakeholder voice involved in research early on, it's like their eyes are opened up. So I really think education is key. Once whichever group is involved in a clinical study is educated on the benefits of having the stakeholders involved early on, and not just patients, but their caregivers as well, and everybody involved in the care of a patient with bladder cancer, it's amazing as to how open and welcome everybody is, just as I'm hearing from all our panelists today. It's so refreshing to hear the enthusiasm and the energy that's going into accepting the patient voice. I'm really encouraged by that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kamat. My next question is for Dr. Pende Toft Jensen from Denmark, who is the chair of the bladder cancer group at the European Association of Urology Nurses. How do you incorporate the patient voice in your work? I think we're having some audio issues with you. Let's try.
Sorry.
There we go.
Thank you, Lydia. My name is Bente Toft Jensen, and I'm a member of the Patient Information Group in the European Organization of Urologists. And I also serve as a part of the nurses organization, where I am the chair of the bladder cancer group. So what we do it in different levels. In the Patient Information Group, we actually develop education materials together with the patient advocacies, because we find it's very important that the education material actually is based on the patient's voice. And it's very interesting to develop this kind of education material with the patient, because it definitely spread light on what their needs are and not what we think their needs are. So it's very fruitful and it's very productive, and I can only encourage others to work with the patients directly in the clinical practice. So in the nurse organization, we involve patients in our sessions at conferences, because we think it's important that our peers and our colleagues hear the voice from the patients. And it's often very popular because it really stretches their needs and their experience from they're diagnosed and until they are finished their rehabilitation. And there's a lot of new issues which we just 10 years ago didn't pay attention to. I mean, how do you prepare the patient in the best way? How do you involve the patient and their peers before, for example, surgery? And this is what we work at the moment, because it's very evident that if you can prepare the patient according to their needs, but also according to their physical situation, then you definitely have better outcome, and the patient have higher health-related quality of life after rehabilitation has ended. So this is on the organizational level. Here in Denmark, we have developed a special group of bladder cancer patients who are invited every second year to take part in adjusting the national clinical guidelines for bladder cancer management. And it's very important to have them on board, and they definitely bring focus on what their needs are and how we need to adjust our clinical pathway to their needs. Right now, we have developed a Bladder Cancer Academy ahead of surgery, where patients undergoing a very specific need assessment, but also a physical assessment, and then we adjust the prehabilitation program to their needs. So they are very, very enthusiastic to take part in their own optimization before surgery, and it's really wonderful to see how encouraged they are, and as well as there's their relatives which are also involved in the preparation. So it's from the organizational level down to clinical level. It shows definitely that the patient voice are the most pivotal.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we've learned that if we can improve patient education and people's understandings of their own treatments, then we have better joint decision making, and then we have better outcomes.
Exactly.
So that's really some really fantastic examples of how we can do that in the real world. The next question is for Dr. Maria Rivas, who is the Chief Medical Officer at Merck EMD Serono. What could industry do to better listen to patients and incorporate the patient perspective into what we offer to doctors and patients? Do you have any examples of what industry is doing really well that other companies could learn from?
Yeah, no, I think that recently, for example, we've shown as an industry, or we finally also started to focus on diversity in clinical recruitment, in clinical trial research participation, and making sure that a variety of patients from various backgrounds are able to still participate in research, so we can learn about the benefits, but also the risks in specific populations. And as such, it's so important to listen to the patient organizations, patients themselves in these populations as well, and understand what are the hurdles currently, what are the beliefs about research, what are the perceptions in terms of the potential benefits to themselves as patients or the potential risks, and to try to work with sensitive, educational, respectful material that allows the patient to make his own decision with his physician about whether research is an appropriate next step for his treatment or her treatment, or their treatment. So that's essentially one very clear area. You know, in our case, very early on, I would say a few years ago, our company realized that actually it's not just the patient, but it's his or her ecosystem, right? In particular, the family, as my previous, one of the previous speakers mentioned, and the caregivers. And it's incredible, again, to see, specifically amplified recently with the COVID pandemic, how much of a burden also in patient and cancer patients' caregivers is this pandemic. And we've been studying this with patient advocacy groups to carefully document what are the specific needs, not just of the patients, but also the caregivers, and make sure that as we look at protocol execution research, you know, that we don't make it extremely onerous on either the patient or the family, the caregiver, or that when we look at how our drugs benefit the patient, we look also at the potential benefits to the caregiver. Is it less visits to the doctor, and so on? So there's so many ways that companies could really look at helping not just the specific disease and the patient get better outcomes in their disease, but also improve the conditions in which the patients get treatment.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And it's great to see more industry dialogue as well, sharing best practice and working together to make sure that you're all improving the patient voice in research and development. Thank you. The next question is for Natalie at the European Medicines Agency. How can patient organizations become actively involved in regulatory processes such as the European Medicines Agency?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, I think it's really important, and I think one of the reasons that we've been able to progress so much on patient engagement is having these amazing European patient organizations who have established themselves and then who, network, they provide support to the patients, and then obviously we can then interact with them. So at EMA, we have various different ways that organizations can get involved with us. They can simply register with us, and then this means that they can receive targeted information. They select what areas they're interested in, and then we would send them this information. They can also register to be involved in different activities, either as an organization or as individual patients within their organization. Again, there's a database. They fill in an application form, and then they do as much or as little as they're interested in. We also have, I mentioned earlier, the Patients and Consumers Working Party, and this is a really great platform for dialogue with the organizations, and they come from what we call our pool of eligible organizations. And so this just means that we put on our website a list of criteria that we developed together with the patient organizations, just to make sure that we really work with, good patient organizations. So it's just things like making sure that they're working in a non-for-profit environment, that they have good communication activities with their patient community, that the members are voted for, this kind of thing. So there's a set of eligibility criteria that the patient organizations can then, if they meet those criteria, they are then listed on our website. They're invited to an annual meeting. They're invited to various workshops, things like that. Also to participate in various public consultations. And also it means that they could join this Patients and Consumers Working Party. We have like a 3-year mandate, and every 3 years, all of the organizations who are eligible are then invited to express their interest to be part of this platform. And we actually have our next mandate coming up next year. So in March next year, we'll be sending out this call, and we encourage as many to get involved as much as they can. I would say as well, from the organizations themselves, to not hesitate to reach out to regulatory agencies. I know that there is variability as to how much different regulatory authorities are engaging with patients, but I think, it's important for you to reach out. Say some maybe want to get involved just in your national agency. Reach out to the authorities. Let them know that you want to help, that you've got important information to share with them. We've learned how valuable it is to understand the perspectives from patient representatives and how that can contribute to the other data that we have. But, things like you experience living on a daily basis with a condition, the unmet needs, what you hope for in a new medicine, etc. So let them know that, you've got this important information. You're not out there to be lobbying, but rather you want to be constructive and share and have this shared decision making, as we mentioned earlier. So I would just say, get in touch. Get involved. I think we all play a part in getting engaged.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that advice is relevant for everyone, every patient organization around the world, not just in Europe. So most national organizations now and national health technology organizations and payers have a mechanism for incorporating the patient voice in their decisions. So we really encourage all patient organizations to get in touch. Thank you, Natalie. And now I have one final question for all of the speakers. So in around 1 minute or so, I would like you to outline what advice would you have for your counterparts around the world who are watching this and perhaps would like to make sure that the bladder cancer patient voice is more strongly heard. So first, Susan, what advice would you have for your counterparts around the world?
Well, I would say you need a passion for learning, the eagerness to share. The patient voice is real. It has to be authentic from a patient perspective, and it's vital. A patient advocate is positively helping with survival, and you can give something back, right the way through from research to care. I would also say that you know, this is a passionate journey for people, but everybody has something that they can offer. And even if they can, as I will do sometimes with patients that are currently going through their treatment and through their own personal journey, the difficulty is in communication. But an advocate can even bridge that gap. You know, they can bladder buddy, they can become somebody who can help to share and just help to pass on that communication. It's vital. Any vital piece of information to our fellow helpers, you know, our medical officers, our urologists, anybody else in the community, it's vital that we share and we feel free to be able to communicate.
Thank you so much, Susan. There's also a question in the chat about how you educate yourself. So I would invite you to answer that question from Laura in the chat as well. Lauren, how do you, what advice do you have for your counterparts around the world who are wanting to do something similar?
So my advice is, remember that if you're a patient advocate, you're a very rare thing. Not everyone can be a patient advocate. Not everyone wants to be a patient advocate, and not everyone feels that they need to be a patient advocate. But the people that take patient advocates have a responsibility to take forward the voice of those patients. So you need to create any opportunity to engage with patients around the world. There are different kinds of patients, and those patients are nervous and they're scared and they're out of their depth. So create places and efforts that help them tell their story. One of the things we always say is just start with telling your story. No one knows. You don't have to be a medical expert. You don't have to be a clinical expert. Just tell your story. That's all. And I think then as also is that at the end of the day, we have an opportunity as bladder cancer patients, and that comes from the challenge. The challenge is that we're marginalized when it comes to what we see and what we're exposed to. And if you have the patient voice, you have the responsibility to make sure that you insert yourself into those discussions. And that's what makes you different from regular patients, because you have to have the resilience to do that. So I think from that point of view, on an individual level, it takes a lot of commitment to do that. And then lastly, as an organization, always keep the patient's voice at the foundation of what you're doing. And if you're doing something and you haven't spoken to a patient about it, it's not probably worth doing.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Those are very wise words. South Africa is very lucky to have you advocating for all of them. The same question is for Dr. Maria Rivas, the Chief Medical Officer at Merck EMD Serono. What advice do you have for your counterparts around the world?
Well, so many good remarks already made by my predecessors. The same applies not just to patient advocates and patients, but also to the industry. First and foremost, I mean, I think that the industry needs to listen carefully to the patient's voice, not assume that there is internal knowledge inside the confines of the corporation about what the patients need and what is in the best interest of the patient. Number two, the industry has some very remarkable capabilities. And one of the things that the companies can do is really look in-house at what kinds of things can we offer the patient community where we have expertise that we could essentially have a win-win and collaborate on. And then the third thing is always our moral compass at our company. And I'm happy to report with our partners from Pfizer, who are also sponsors today. We've been able to keep our very strong moral compass in how we engage our patients, with patients, in terms of always looking at things in the best interest in their best interest.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rivas, for your time and for your advice today. Natalie Baer, Patient Engagement, European Medicines Agency. What advice do you have for your regulatory counterparts around the world?
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, I'd just say that really engage with patients along all the different activities. I would say work with the organizations, do it in a stepwise approach as well. I think that's what we learned as well, was to do each time we decided to involve them in a different activity, we set up a pilot, we worked together with them to really make sure that the way we were engaging was as optimal as it can be. And I think that's what we heard earlier, which I really agree with, is about setting up as nice or as conducive environment as we can to allow patients to really share their experiences and to focus on whatever discussion is going on at that time. I think from joining a regulatory agency from a patient's perspective isn't always, it can be a bit daunting, but it's for us to then support them in a way that they can feel, relaxed and able to contribute and feel that what they're sharing is valuable. So I think I would say that to do it in a stepwise approach and to really try and optimize that environment that allows that sharing of information.
Thank you so much, Natalie, and thank you so much for your time today. The same question to Dr. Bente Jensen. What advice would you have for your counterparts around the world?
Patients with bladder cancer have specific needs, and their relatives has as well. And so for us, it's pivotal that you have a careful need assessment when you are involved with bladder cancer patients, because it's mandatory in order to be able to provide appropriate supportive care along the pathway. So if you are able to have a fine and deep need assessment, then you're able, together with the patient and the relatives, to plan what is supposed to go on during the treatment or the surgery. So also it's evident that nurses play a key role in the patient's clinical pathway, and we should, as nurses, be able to engage and motivate not only the patient but also their relatives to improve their condition and the skills during the clinical pathway. And I think when you focus on what we know, because from research, patient indicates that they like to be physically active, they want to do the best they can in order to be fit for surgery. So you should focus on providing enjoyable activities and educate the patient on the benefits of adhere to preoperative physical programs. And I think it's also important to target the barriers the patient indicate for not being able to participate, for example, in prehabilitation program, because often they are those who need it most. So if you are able to identify the barriers for being active or undergo the education programs which we provide all over Europe, I mean, then it's absolutely important to be able to identify those patients who are not able to participate. So when we educate the patient, we are often asked, what happens if I can't fulfill this program? Will my clinical results in the end be, not so good? And of course, we have to say that if you are able to participate just a little bit, then it's always worth it. So when we have done the clinical assessment prior to surgery, we sit down and plan a program together with the patients and their relatives, if possible, because it's not only the patient but also the peers and the relatives who suffer under such important thing like being diagnosed with invasive bladder cancer. So often we discuss with the patients and the relative what they actually feel about it, because it's not only the physical part of being prepared and reduce the risk factors ahead of surgery, it's also about the psychosocial care. And often the patients have expressed, well, I know this is important, but I don't have the energy or the the ability to participate in these kind of programs. So it's important to identify whether they are depressed or have other troubles in participating, because that definitely will impact on the outcome in the end. So if we are able to identify whether they are depressed or have any other troubles, then we can target the preoperative program to their also their psychosocial needs, because we know that if you're not able to target, then you will not be able to improve their self-efficacy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bente. There's also a question for you in the chat box about please sharing some of the tools that you use. So this brings our panel discussion to a close. So I would very much like to thank Susan, Lauren, Maria, Natalie, and Bente for this informative, inspiring, and uplifting discussion. Thank you so much for your time. It's wonderful to get international perspectives from many different members of the bladder community. So thank you very much for all of your time and for sharing so many insights and advice with us. So I will now move on to the next session where we will have our very talented and passionate Executive Director, Alex Filichevich, who will be talking about a very exciting study capturing bladder cancer patient experience around the world. Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lydia, and thank you everyone, Dr. Kamat and all the speakers that we had on the panel today. I really certainly enjoyed following the discussion, and I think it's so wonderful to see such great interest and commitment across the board, across different disciplines around patient involvement, incorporating that bladder cancer patient voice in the work that you are all doing. And so today I would like to share our part as well of what we are doing in this area and how we want to give a little bit more to that bladder cancer patient voice with our upcoming bladder cancer patient and caregiver experience survey. And I'm glad to see that also the caregiver aspect has featured in quite a few speakers today, and this is something that we want to incorporate as well. So the survey that we are currently working on will be centered around generating evidence to capture bladder cancer patient and caregiver experiences around the world. Our aim is to really deepen and quantify the understanding that we have of bladder cancer patient experiences from their own perspective and how they have experienced their care. Identifying also common challenges. As an international coalition, we really want to work together and to collaborate and to really see where can we add more value as an international level, and where can we support national organizations with data, with these insights, and drive that change to support bladder cancer patient care improvement, looking at things, those roadblocks to access and ways to improve and learnings. And hopefully we uncover some interesting case studies and examples that could be inspiring and could be great to be replicated in different countries. And so we hope also, lastly, that would allow us to propose ways to improve patient outcomes and support services for people affected by bladder cancer around the world. And I would say that is our ultimate goal with this study. Now, what was the study rationale specifically here, and what we saw that was missing really in the research landscape and the conversations that we hear about bladder cancer patient community, was giving a more quantifying, giving more voice to bladder cancer patients when it comes to research. We have done extensive literature reviews and looking into what has been done to date, and we really found lack of research into the area of bladder cancer patient experience at a more global scale, more international level. While some of our organizations have definitely done some fantastic work at national level, we were also seeing that understanding of critical gaps in current care services varies as well from country to country, and we wanted to bring that up a little bit and to build that understanding for all of us, both in the coalition, but also all partners and stakeholders, and really to have an open resource for everyone. to use, and of course to the evidence base to really quantify what patients are sharing through patient support services, because we do hear these stories. Our member organizations offering support services directly to patients have this incredible resource, and in the way they do support patients and caregivers who are affected by bladder cancer, which provides insights. And so we want to quantify that and to really have an evidence base that we can use in advocacy, and we want to improve the care for bladder cancer patients, and of course experience of caregivers that I've mentioned as well, and challenges faced by caregivers in bladder cancer, specifically for those caring for those affected by bladder cancer, is limited. Next slide, please. And so we have done so with a great, fantastic guidance of expert advisory committee that we have brought together. It's a multi-stakeholder, multidiscipline group of leaders in the field, including, and some of the speakers that we had heard from today also have helped us to drive this project forward. And they have been closely involved from start to finish. And really the main focus for us was to ensure that we get the study right, from the methodology part all the way through to the reporting and data analysis. And of course, this is a patient survey for patients, and we were of course supported by insights from our member organizations who have been closely involved in research development and really guidance in that area, as well as our World Bladder Cancer Patient Coalition Patient Advisory Panel. So I thank all of these people who have contributed and who's been involved for their fantastic strategic guidance in this project. Now, the key areas of focus that we have identified through our work and through our discussions with everyone, if we can have a next slide, please. We will be covering an entire care pathway, really, as our member organizations in early conversations have expressed, and this has been also added by the expert advisory committee, that would be extremely valuable to have the globally comparable data on the bladder cancer patient experience to cover the entire care pathway. Now, so the key areas there are really awareness, diagnosis, treatment, and care. You see information and support, and survivorship and quality of life. And it covers the most important areas that we'd like to focus on within those within those parts. So we not extend the survey that is too long for patients to engage in, but really finding the right balance. And so we'll be launching the study on October 1st. It will be starting off in English and shortly follow with the languages that you see on the screen. So we're really working hard to make sure that we facilitate the access to as many patients as we can around the world, and that we elevate that patient voice across the world, no matter where these patients live, that they do have an opportunity to respond. So I will, of course, invite you to share this and get involved with us there in dissemination. If I could just have a next slide, please. I just would like to briefly share with you why, what are the main goals and what we are striving to achieve. And as I mentioned earlier, again, give the voice to bladder cancer patients to help them drive better care and patient outcomes across the world in different countries, both with our existing members and hopefully with new organizations that will join the coalition or that we will be supporting on their journey to get established. One of the biggest parts here would be definitely to inform advocacy work and provide an evidence base, as I've mentioned, to quantify those experiences for bladder cancer patient community, and generate a really well-argued analysis with a published report on identifying any strengths and gaps that do persist in bladder cancer care pathway from a patient experience and from a caregiver experience. And of course, maximize the potential of these findings of the studies to be adopted by healthcare services and really involve decision makers, policymakers in this process, with our strong membership on the ground, but also beyond that around the world. So we're really looking to make an impact and help elevate that patient voice. And so just lastly, I would like to say, since I have such a great audience with us today from all around the world, I would like to share a few pointers as well, what you can do to get involved, to help us to reach bladder cancer patients and caregivers in your countries and your communities. And I know that we have a very mix of countries here today and a mix of different representation from patients to patient advocates and industry and regulatory and healthcare professionals. So it's really, really, I think, wonderful to have all of you here. And I think each of us have an opportunity to contribute and a role to play. So you can share the survey online and offline. As I mentioned, it will be launching on October 1st in English, and shortly after the remainder of the languages will be following. Invite you to explore resources as well. We are developing these to help the dissemination. You can also partner with us in this project, and do reach out with me directly. You can see my email address on the screen. And of course, you can also visit our website. You can see a direct link here to the study page. But if you just visit worldbladdercancer.org, you will easily find all the information and resources, which will be topped up, of course, on October 1st. So with this, I would like to thank you so much for your time, and I'm really looking forward to hopefully hearing from many of you with ideas and suggestions how we can make sure that the survey reaches as many patients as possible. And now I will hand over to Lydia, who has a fantastic session ready for you on patient advocates that are joining the discussion today. Over to you, Lydia.
Thank you so much, Alex. What an exciting survey. I'm really excited to see the launch in October. So I really hope that everyone who is watching this can get involved. The next session is titled Sharing Knowledge and Driving Change, and we have 3 amazing patients from around the world who will be sharing their story. We have Laura from Association Palinuro in Italy, we have Tony from Bladder Cancer Canada, and we have Melanie Costin from Fight Bladder Cancer in the UK. All 3 of these are bladder cancer patients themselves who have gone above and beyond in order to make sure that everyone in their country who was affected by bladder cancer has a slightly easier journey than they did themselves. So first we have Laura Magenta from Italy, Association Palinuro, who will be sharing some of the work that they have been doing to improve the bladder cancer patient journey in Italy. Laura, the chair is yours.
Thank you very much, Lydia. And just a little introduction to me and to Associazione Palinuro, which is the only Italian patients organization born to inform and support people with bladder cancer and raise awareness about it. And my name is Laura, and I am a bladder cancer patient since 2016, when I had my radical cystectomy. And the experience of my disease generated my choice to fully dedicate my professional skills to patient advocacy. Thanks for inviting me on behalf of the President Eduardo to present today our project named Euro Hospital Advisor. Next slide, please. First of all, I wanted to introduce which is the situation in Italy. Population is around 60 million of people. Hospitals are around 1,000. The hub centers for bladder cancer are around 80. And most of them are located in the north of Italy. In Italy, bladder cancer is the 5th common cancer with 25,500 new diagnoses in 2020. And 20,500 for male and 5,000 for female. Next slide, please. Normally, you know, when a person finds out to have a cancer, goes into a blackout. Often, emotional stress and lack of knowledge don't allow the patients to have the clarity to orient themselves in the clinical path. This is the reason why we think that choose the most appropriate hospital with respect to the patient expectation is an important key to better accept the disease and compliant with therapies with greater awareness. So, next slide. Our objective. we want to offer our best and concrete experience aimed at guiding new patients to the best choice of hospital. We want to support all advocacy associations by offering them the opportunity to use our app for free, and we want to increase knowledge of our association. Next. The project, we have named it EuroH Advisor or Urological Hospital Advisor. It is like a trip advisor for bladder cancer patients and caregivers to guide them in choosing the competent, effective, and human hospital for the treatment of the disease. Next. Our most important function is information, often mediated by the plurality of our experiences, and information that also concern the choice of the best hospital close to the home, which can certainly be helped and recommended by those who have personally known the structures in the area and who are able to highlight their strengths and weaknesses. We believe in the importance to arrange and aggregate these judgments. Next. So the project aims to provide patients and their families with an accessible, reliable, verified, experiential, and concrete information on the structure in which to be treated in terms of competence. We mean the full ability to orientate the patient's clinical path and be up to date on the best medical and surgical technique, mastering their use. Effectiveness, ability to produce effect and desired results in a timely manner. Next. Humanity is the ability to relate to the patient, providing empathy and consideration, making them feel like they are in charge by staying up to date with their state of health and participating in the therapeutic choices that concern them. So put the person at ease by giving them adequate and decent care services. And then overall guidance, so whether to recommend or not to a patient who is starting the clinical path. Next, what we have done, our roadmap. We have identified the criteria of evaluation. We have identified the most important characteristics of onco-urological ward. I mean, availability of tests, diagnostic, therapies, type of surgery, rehabilitation, with the support of urologists. We have collected the main information about the Italian hospital with the source of the Health Italian Ministry websites. We have collected information about the center with high volume activity, I mean the hub centers for radical cystectomy with greater surgical experience, and the higher the number of interventions performed, the greater the reliability of the center, and the minimum in Italy is 20 per year. And the source is National Outcomes Program. We have made a 6-month test with a limited group of patients, around 100 evaluation reach, and we paid attention to the privacy aspect, and the application will be accessible only from our website, so the same policy will apply. Next, please. Simply how it works. The features are mainly two. You have the search. You can search by the name of the hospital or by region, city, type of therapy or surgery. Next. Okay, these are the filters. And you can see some example on how you can find the details. And then we have the evaluation. Next. You need to register with your username and password, search the hospital. Next. Search the hospital, as you can see. And then next, evaluate competence, effectiveness, and humanity with score from 1 to 5. And evaluating the experience as a whole by grading it from 1 to 5 with the possibility to leave a comment. And comments are evaluated before publishing to avoid polemical or inappropriate tones. We expect to run at full capacity within 4 or 5 years. The project will officially begin with the publication of the platform between the end of September and the first day of October. Next, please. The publication will be accompanied by a communication campaign on Google and Facebook and other social media, and then the press release. In the initial phase, we will invite the population to enter mainly the evaluations to provide patients and their caregivers with an increasingly reliable research tool. That's it. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura. We'll move on to the next presentation, and then I have some questions for you at the end. So the next presenter is Tony from Bladder Cancer Canada, who will be introducing some of the work that Bladder Cancer Canada is doing to support people affected by bladder cancer in Canada.
Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you find yourself in the world. The pandemic's definitely made things like this a lot easier to get connected, that's for sure. Lydia, thank you for the opportunity to present. And we're going to just talk about, there's some great work being done right across the world for patient advocacy. And one of the things that I'm going to focus on my presentation is what we've titled Embracing the Medical and Research Community. And it really talks about the work that we're doing with our medical and research advisory boards. Next slide, please. We've got to start off by really saying that we've established a really strong relationship and partnership with our medical advisory and research board. And that's made up of urologists, oncologists, pathologists as well. And we really find that validates and authenticates the work that we do from a patient advocacy group. And they are really involved or engaged at every turn of this process for us. Everything from the medical aspect or the patient inquiry standpoint, website content, validating the information that we've got on our website. And from an involvement standpoint, this weekend is our a big annual walk for bladder cancer in Canada. And it's amazing to see so much of that medical and advisory board participate in that, given how busy their schedules are. So that's a testament to the involvement that they have and the passion that they have for the patient advocacy as well. It's really designed for an exchange of information both ways, right? For us to gather information medically, but that for them to get information from us as well on the patient voice. And we really treat it as a collaboration and accountability to each other, holding them to task and them holding us to task as well. Next slide, please. I just wanted to take some time just to highlight some of the specific work that we do. On an annual basis, we do hold a Canadian Bladder Cancer Forum. Obviously, the pandemic's thrown a wrench into those regular meetings, but we've hopefully have another in-person meeting in March and April of 2022. And we really get together just to exchange some of the work that we're doing. They share with us some of the research and clinical trials that are going on. And then we talk about some of the other initiatives that I'll briefly discuss in the next few minutes. And that's a great forum just to connect and check the pulse of what's going on in bladder cancer in Canada. One of my favorite initiatives is what we call a quality of care initiative that the board has created, and it really takes a look at different hospital performance measures, things like how long does it take from when you get your cysto to when you get your TERP, and it can get involved in what percentage of metastatic patients are referred for some sort of second-line treatment after first-line chemo. What percentage of muscle-invasive patients identified in TERP get referred to radiation oncology. So it really sets parameters such as those, put timelines to them and then measures how they stand up to those measures. So it's really refreshing from a patient perspective to see that there are actually measures that they can do to really identify the quality of care or quantify the quality of care rather. One of the other things that we've been very involved over the last year and a half or even longer is BCG advocacy. You know, I know for me personally, hearing that there was a BCG shortage was almost as hard as hearing the word cancer first. You know, here we've got a drug that's, you know, well used in the treatment of bladder, and there's a worldwide shortage. So we with the doctors are advocating to Merck and other manufacturers, not that there's many, to really take a look at where that shortage is and what's being done to tackle that. So again, another initiative that we've done with the doctors. Next slide, please. We're involved in research funding, you know, funding grants for different research projects. We've got an annual campaign that we review different applications and then fund granting. So that's, you know, again, with their expertise, how do we further bladder cancer treatments in Canada? So that's a big part of what we do. Rachel had asked a question about regulatory process in the EU. And although we don't request drug approvals directly, we are very involved in that process to support any of those funding approval requests. Not only drug requests, but things like biomarker testing for different drugs. We were involved in that with the medical board. So, you know, any way we can add the patient voice to that is very important. They are a wealth of information for us in different seminars and webinars that we do. I am a clinical trial patient myself, so we've been able to put on webinars, and they have always been very supportive of those initiatives for us as well. Next slide, please. This is a very exciting project that we're helping out with as well, and it's the Canadian Bladder Cancer Information System. So it's a national information system that really takes that really houses core clinical data that will be used for further research. So it's multi-institutional. So it doesn't just take a look at hospitals and research settings individually, but it really collects that data amongst the entire country, and it inventories all of those existing databases. And it includes clinical data from urologists, medical oncologists, radiation oncologists, and we've got our voice in there as well. And you know, what better goal is there than to identify potential research questions for them to take on. And that brings us to the next slide, if you can, please. This is the newest initiative that we're working on, and I'm really excited about this because the Canadian Bladder Cancer Research Network was established to really promote research and collaboration right across the country. So that, you know, something that's done in BC on the Western Coast and in Toronto and in Montreal and other centers is really unified, right? And duplicating efforts is minimized, right? So that they can really get the synergies across the country. And it's really to promote that research in the country. You know, we all know that bladder cancer is in Canada the 5th most common cancer, but it's in the high teens in terms of funding. So it really promotes that research, and how do we highlight research and further that treatment regime for bladder cancer. So it's a really exciting project. And last year we had our inaugural meeting to really identify gaps and strengths in that process across the country. And we've identified 4 areas of research that should be focused on, and that's biomarkers, epigenetics, microbiomes, and immuno-oncology. So a lot of work that we've done with that medical community to really further bladder cancer, ultimately for the patient. So we're really proud of that work that we've done. And again, I just wanted to repeat, it really is a strong partnership and relationship that we have with the board. So thank you for allowing us to present that.
Thank you so much, Tony. That's a very comprehensive overview of the work of Bladder Cancer Canada, and very inspiring to see that you're doing so much to make sure that bladder cancer research and care is improved in Canada.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. We'll have some questions for you at the end. So Melanie Costin is from Fight Bladder Cancer UK. She is a bladder cancer patient herself, and she is also the support services manager. And she has really done astonishing work to improve the support for bladder cancer patients in the UK. And one of the projects that she's been involved in is these patient information booklets. And I am just so delighted and proud to be able to welcome Melanie Costin to the stage to share her story and some of the work that she has been doing.
Hi, Lydia. Yeah, so I'm the support services manager for Fight Bladder Cancer. And as Lydia mentioned, I'm also a patient. And when I was first told I had bladder cancer, I wasn't given any information at all. Move forward to a couple of months later when you have your full diagnosis, I still didn't have any information. So I decided to see if there's anything in the waiting room. And there was two booklets. There was a non-muscle invasive and a muscle invasive. That was the choice. So I picked up the non-muscle invasive because that was my diagnosis. It was really, really thick. There was lots of words. It was extremely grueling to read, and hardly any of it was relevant to my particular situation. So I picked it up. I read the first few pages, and I read the last few pages. So I went from the best case scenario to the worst case scenario. And that really was it. That was all there was for me, apart from trawling through, well, we say Dr. Google. And it seemed like few people were given the necessary information, and they really wanted something better, more relevant, and easier to understand than what they already had. So in a moment of wisdom and maybe a little bit of madness, we decided to make our own information booklets. So if you'd like to put my first slide up, please. This is Andrew Winterbottom. He's the founder of Fight Bladder Cancer, also a patient himself. He's sadly passed away now. He says it's crucial that everyone affected by bladder cancer, patients, carers, families and friends, have a reliable place to come to for support, information and advice. Andrew started getting bits and pieces together for these booklets, and when we found the right moment after he died, we decided that we would really go for it and get these done. Next slide, please. So currently we've got a suite of 10 booklets. We have tried to cover all of the aspects that you could possibly think of. So we started from initial tests and investigations, because with bladder cancer, you don't get your diagnosis straight away generally. You have a lot more tests to go through, and you still want to know what's going on and what might be happening. So we started at the beginning. We've gone through non-muscle invasive, low grade, high grade, living with a stoma or a neobladder, and surviving bladder cancer. Next slide, please. The important thing about these booklets is that there is a hell of a lot of patient involvement. It's really important to have that. We've tried to use as many real people as we can. It's not only to illustrate, for example, what a stoma actually looks like. We have photos of people's stomas that they've kindly given to us, but also to encourage others, because when you see people having survived something similar to you, or maybe somebody that looks a little bit like yourself, someone you can relate to, it makes you think, well, if they can do it, then maybe I can. Next slide, please. So all the way through the booklets, we have patient tips. These are absolutely invaluable. We've shown them in little speech bubbles that you can see. That's just a small example, but there's so much information and ideas that they've shared with people. The sorts of things that you wouldn't get from, say, a medical book or maybe from your nurse. You know, these are things that are real lived experiences. Next slide, please. And we did try and choose illustrations as well to go with the feel of the booklets. Actually, looking at that one there, I don't think you can make having a TURBT procedure particularly friendly, but we've tried. And also to remember that bladder cancer used to be considered an older man's cancer, but actually, well, I'm not an older man. Lots of us aren't. It's important to consider the older men. They are the biggest group of people, but there's people of all ages and sizes and both sexes. So it is important to show that. Next slide, please. So we've included a patient story in each booklet as well. So this is lovely Dorothy. She's a fantastic advocate, patient herself, and she writes in one of the booklets about how she felt when she was first diagnosed with muscle invasive bladder cancer. And there's a story in each of them. So there'll be a person that somebody can read about, a real person in each of the booklets that's already been through these procedures. We have tried to cover all the things that the patient might need to know along the whole of their bladder cancer journey. Next slide, please. Right, so now we come to the actual booklets themselves. We've been getting these out to all the urology departments and clinics, as many as we can. We hope to cover all of them eventually. The nurses, they actually will have a folder. It's a large folder. It's got everything in it. I'll hold one up for you. It's a good thing we're not live because this is heavy and I would have had to have struggled along to get this. So this is for the nurses. So they'll have that. They'll have that in their area, their place of work. And they can, with this information, they can order a relevant booklet for their patient. Somebody might come in with a particular diagnosis and they can choose a booklet for them. And it's also handy for them to use a discussion aid talking about a procedure. You know, they've got these books, they're a large size, they're about A4 for the nurses. And so they can use those to help the patients. The patients are also able to order their own via links, for example, on our website. So they can either have a download, a PDF version, which they can read on their own device, or maybe print out relevant sections, or we're happy to send them in a post as well. These are a lot smaller. This is about A5 size. It looks quite large next to my head. Maybe you get the idea there. They're a lot smaller than the nurses' ones. Really handy. They've got information. You can write your appointments down. There's a section in the back for your hospital number, your consultant. So, you know, these are really useful and they're small enough and light enough to put in your bag if you need. They're also very useful in my own work because if you are supporting patients yourself, in the past I have sent quite a lot of downloads to people to accompany descriptions of things I would like to say to them. But they're really handy because now I can offer them the chance of having a booklet. I mean, I can send them the online version, the downloadable version, but not everybody has got a computer. Or a smartphone, so we can send them out too, and all free of charge. So here we go.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Melanie. And so I'd like to invite all three patients to join the stage now because I have some questions for you. My first question is for Laura here. So Laura, how are you funding your project?
Oh yes, our project. We participated in a national tender launched by an important foundation, and we won the project funding. So that's why.
Congratulations! Congratulations, Laura. That's really wonderful. And well deserved. My next question is for Tony. How do you reach newly diagnosed patients to tell them about the support that you offer?
That's a great question, and it is so. It's really we really rely on the urologist community to tell patients about us, and we're in urology clinics. We've got a good social media presence as well. So if somebody's searching for bladder cancer information in Canada, they can get to our website. We've got some really good peer-to-peer support programs as well. So if a patient's looking for that information and they get to us, they've got that access to them. You know, I got to be honest, sometimes that's a challenge. There's 12,000 Canadians diagnosed every year. And our advocacy work, our awareness campaign is making that easier year over year. We've got our national walk this weekend, like I mentioned. So those are all in efforts to get that awareness out to the Canadian community that we're there for them. You know, it'd be very nice to be able to get to all 12 of those 12,000 patients, and we're doing a better job every year of it.
Yes, we have a similar challenge here in the UK, and I'm sure many of our member organisations have a similar challenge around the world. The next question is for Melanie. What advice would you have for others who would like to develop patient information materials in their country?
There is a lot to cover when you're writing this book. It does seem to keep on growing and growing, the information. So the best thing to do is just to break it down into small sections. Some areas are going to need a lot more work on than others. Just remember to try and keep it clear and understandable enough for the patient to take on. Don't get caught in the details too much. Just keep going with the flow, and then you can build it up in the areas that you need later on. Always including the tips and photos of real people if you can. Obviously, it's not possible in all of the situations and diagrams, but it makes so much difference, and their suggestions are fantastic. That they make so much difference. Obviously, I mentioned about making sure that when you have got your diagrams, do a male and a female, because it's important. It did always used to be men's shapes. We know what our bodies look like, but it's really good to be able to see, you know, the male and the female, and to represent that. And to give yourself enough time to do it. Don't set yourself a really strong deadline, because you will need to get everything checked and rechecked, and endorsed by all the relevant urological bodies in your own countries. So that is something that did take us a lot of time to get all of the relevant checks. It's got to be right, especially if they're going in hospitals, and for patients it has to be accurate. I suppose my final bit of advice is don't attempt to start doing them during the lockdown. At the beginning of the pandemic, we thought that was a good idea because everyone would be happily sitting at computer screens doing not a lot. But as it turned out, that was the complete opposite. So yes, try and find the right time to start them when there isn't too many other things going on.
Thank you, Melanie. Yes, it was definitely made 2020 an interesting year for us all. We have a question from William that I will direct to Laura first. How can industry support your work beyond simply funding and grants?
For me, sorry?
Yes, yes.
In Italy, a lot of industries are given the possibility to have access to their tender, mainly foundation collegated with the industries. And so we have the possibility to participate and ask presenting a project. For example, we have started with presenting this project, but if we have other project, we can present, and maybe if they choose us, they give us grants or donation. It depends on the industry, on the foundation, and so on. I don't know exactly for each industry, but for sure, for some of them, it's possible to donate or give grants for project from association.
Thank you, Laura. And the same question to you, Tony. How can industry support your initiatives beyond funding and grants?
Yeah, funding and grants is always a challenge, right? But it's really about information exchange. You know, to things like guidebook development. You know, is there any information that we can get from pharma or from industry that can be included or validate some of that information in there? You know, the funding and the grant process, like I said, is difficult. So we've got to find other ways that they can support those initiatives. Even from a marketing perspective or anything else that we can do. From a funding perspective, somebody mentioned in the chat about our awareness campaign and videos in bus shelters, and that is something that we've done some really good work in Canada with, to really get advertisers to really donate their services. There's obviously a value to that, but it's not direct funding for our marketing campaign. So that was one way that we've been really successful to get industry to help us, and that wasn't pharma, but just industry in general. So it's trying to be creative in those ways.
Yes, Tony, and I think we can learn from each other in terms of creative ways to work with other stakeholders, some who are directly involved in bladder cancer and perhaps some who only have a tangential relationship with bladder cancer.
Yes.
The next question is for Melanie. How do you distribute these resources to healthcare professionals?
Well, I've sort of answered that one already, but we go through and we find not only the contacts that we already have within neurology, but contacts that we don't have. We've got something really good to show them and for their patients, and why wouldn't they want that extra help? So yeah, we contact them if they're interested. They can have their folder, and at that point, then it's up to them whether they would like to order them for their patients. They can find the information on our website. There's very easy, clear links to follow, both for patients and for the professionals that are looking after their patients. So really just the general ways. Would you like? Yes or no? If no, why not? and get them out there to as many places as we possibly can, not just the hospitals. They've been going out to urological clinics, stoma nurses as well, because we have a booklet on the stoma and everything that involves. So yeah, we just make sure that we contact the right bodies and then show them. And I think once they've seen them, I mean, they are really nice. Why wouldn't you want to have one?
Thank you, Melanie. The next question is for Laura. What advice would you have for others who would like to develop hospital information in their country?
Yes. We recommend considering a project like Euro H Advisor. If there is a very strong demand for guidance among the people who call for support, especially if the best hospitals are not evenly distributed throughout the territory. I mean, our aim is also to avoid major health migration. So it's important not to have a lot of people going from south to north, for example, of Italy. And that's the reason why if there is a situation like this one in your country, it's important to have a guidance for patients. So the project anyway can be replicated and extended to any association that deals with the bladder cancer, or also other pathologies as well. There is no limit to geographical areas, for example. The platform is ready to use if something want to ask us. Just need translation and data entry based on local information, of course. That's it.
Thank you, Laura. That's excellent advice. My next question is for Tony. So I've been very impressed by your awareness walks that happened in September. You really managed to bring a huge number of people around such a huge country together to unite for bladder cancer. And it's very inspiring to other bladder cancer patient coalitions and other bladder cancer patient organizations around the world. What is the secret of your success of your awareness walks?
You know, that's a great question. We are a small organization, but with a lot of passion for what we do. So it's everybody in the organization stepping up to take a part in that awareness campaign. Again, to the marketing campaign that we have in the entire country. We've got what we call a red campaign, which is a lemon that's squeezing out blood. That's very powerful. So that message has gotten across the country as well. We've got some really good media sponsors as well that have promoted the walk, and it's just getting bigger and bigger each year. Obviously, the pandemic hasn't helped, but we've seen some great participation in the walks. You're very right. We're very proud of how we've been able to promote that. So yes, so it is this weekend again.
Thank you, and I hope you have excellent weather. My next question is for Melanie. We've over the pandemic, as you've mentioned, we've been very disconnected, and we've been just spending a lot of time in our own homes, and a lot of bladder cancer patients have felt quite disconnected and quite alone. What is your advice for helping people feel more connected and feel part of the bladder cancer community in these strange times where we're often physically disconnected?
That's really difficult. I mean, everyone has different way of wishing to communicate. So I've noticed that there's a lot more people. My picture went then. A lot of people are using their smartphones and their computers that they've never had to use before for doing basic things like getting food, and it's encouraged them to take part with other things that are happening. And we've been doing a lot of our meetings online. We do support groups online that people can join in with and gain their confidence. But we've also been there as people. We're at the end of the phone. During the pandemic, when it first started up, the amount of people that wanted to just chat and just hear another voice, because a lot of people are on their own. I'm still working at home myself and feel quite disconnected from a lot of the reality, but we're slowly getting there. And this is a thing as well. A lot of people, although they don't want to be inside with all the things, they also are quite nervous now to go out and going into hospitals. And we've been encouraging people that it's okay to go to the hospital. But it's a really hard time with everything being cancelled, and we can just be there to encourage. I'm a patient myself. I've also had things cancelled, and there's a sense of community. We have a sense of community going on that was already developed, but with our confidential forum, for example, people are very communicative, and they want to be part of things, and they are coming and they're joining in and coming to see meetings like this. It's just making sure that everybody feels like they're all included, even though we're in our separate little houses. And I think that, there's obviously a lot of bad things that have happened, but it has been quite fortuitous in some ways that people have had no option but to try to do these new things online. And really, we've been trying to make that as best we can, and just be there for as many people as we can. There's only a few of us that fight bladder cancer, so we're all very tired. But yeah, just keep going, because we're nearly out. Hopefully, we're nearly at the other end, and we're still going. And all the patients are really appreciative that there's someone there for them, and it's quite nice for us as well to talk to people. Because we're people as well. I'm a patient, and it's quite nice for me to get a phone call from somebody, even though they're nervous and worried. It's just about kind of community in a way. We're all in it together, kind of feeling.
Yes, absolutely. And I think events like this as well remind us that there is a international bladder cancer community as well as a national bladder cancer community. My next question is for Laura. Could you tell us about the WhatsApp chat that you have started for Italian bladder cancer patients?
Yes, I think it's about 2 years ago. we offered the possibility to enter in different 3 types of WhatsApp chat. One for neobladder patient, one for urostomized patient, and one for people which has not muscle invasive bladder cancer. I don't know how to say in English, there is when you have groups that they meet together, but we have no possibility to have in the same location physically as people is all over the country. And so we tried to give them a place where they can speak each other, starting from the fact that they are in the same condition, so they share the same problems. So, for example, I am in the chat with the urostomized people, and so I have it, and if I have problems, I know, or if I have success in my therapy, in my life, I can share this experience with other ones who has the same situation I am having in this moment. So we think it's a great opportunity for people to be together with other friends, a community of people, a big community, and then 3 little community sharing the same situation, the same problems, the same success.
Thank you, Laura. And yes, when you're sharing those very specific problems that might also be national or regional as well, then it is wonderful to be able to say, I'm going to this hospital, what can I expect? Or I'm going to have this surgery, what can I expect? And you can get all those very specific hints and tips that can really help you with navigating what is a very stressful time. I do have a similar question for Tony. What are some of the ways that Bladder Cancer Canada has so that Canadian bladder cancer patients can connect with each other?
A great question. I love the WhatsApp idea. We don't have that. So we've got peer-to-peer support. So we can match up a patient with another patient that's had similar symptoms, or non-muscle invasive to non-muscle invasive. I'm metastatic, so I'll talk to somebody that has metastatic disease. We've got a great discussion forum on our website that again, you can ask questions and someone will answer that for you and get back to you. Again, the social media platform, if you see something on Facebook or Twitter, or even Instagram, we can connect that way as well. So it's really taking a look at social media, our website, and then our peer-to-peer support group, and then the seminars and webinars that we have on any particular topic as well.
Thank you, Tony. That's a suite of information and a suite of resources so people can really find the best way that works for them to connect with other patients and also learn more about their disease. And a final question here for Melanie Costin. Could you tell us about the Fight Bladder Cancer private forum, please?
Privately. So, we have a private forum. It's run on Facebook. We run it on Facebook because it's a good way of being able to keep it private. It works for us. We have about, I didn't look to see how many there were today. I should have done. There's over 5,000 people on there, the majority of them very active. We cover all over the world, but it's majority of people are English speaking, although with the Translate now you can type in your words of the foreign language. We do get some other hilarious results on that, but we can work out what people are asking for. And it's a sort of forum where anything goes. You can ask any question that you can think of. It's one of those in the middle of the night, oh my gosh, what's going on here? You can go straight on there and there'll always be somebody there. America's awake when we're not. We are supported also by medical people. We have oncologists and nurses that dip in and out. And, you know, we keep an eye on it. If there's anything that looks wrong, then we'll be straight in there and sorting it out. We make sure that people get the decent information. But it's a really nice community that's developed. We say we are family. I won't sing it for you. But it does feel like that sometimes. You know, it is a bit like a soap opera. There's arguments, of course there are, but they're quite few and far between. And a lot of these people end up meeting each other as well. You know, people become friends. We do have a bladder buddy service where people can talk one-to-one, but people on there, they if somebody's going to an area and someone lives nearby, they're arranging to meet up. Finding out information, we can let people know everything that's going on, like this meeting today. What, you know, the support groups. People post funnies as well. We have a few jokers on there putting their funny bladder jokes up. Yeah, I think it's a really successful forum. I haven't been on many medical forums, but from what I've heard, ours has less arguments than most, so we're not doing too badly. And it's a very fraught time when you have bladder problems, as I know you two other patients can understand. You can't just put it out of your mind when you've got all these pains and problems, and so people are allowed to vent as much as they want, and it's really nice. I think we're quite proud of it, and I like being part of it as well. It's a lot of hard work, but very, very worth it.
Thank you, Melanie. And thank you so much, Laura and Tony, for sharing your personal story and also the work that you've been doing with your respective organizations. I would now like to hand the floor to Alex Filichevas, who will be sharing his final thoughts, conclusions, and summary. And then please hang around for the virtual networking afterwards, where hopefully I will be able to meet as many of you as possible one-to-one.
Lydia, and thank you again for Melanie, Tony, Laura, really wonderful presentations. And I think it shows how we can have many different ways and many different projects and from small to large, and to have an impact and to really show provide support to people affected by bladder cancer in our community. So I hope that serves as an inspiration to others looking to do something similar or looking for ideas how they can do more in their communities. I know that we have many patient advocates in the room with us today as well. What was great to see in earlier conversation, I found as well to see that there is not only an understanding for the need of bladder cancer patient voice across research across different parts of bladder cancer care, but really the eagerness for it. And I thought things like proactive outreach that Natalie has mentioned, reaching out to regulatory agencies and industry. And I think in every single person that I spoke today, including in our last session, I think would concur that patient voice is incremental if we want to drive and change bladder cancer patient care. And we can only do that as well together when we collaborate across different disciplines and across different parts affecting bladder cancer patient care. And it's great to see that accommodating environment, and I hope that will inspire everyone, not just patient advocates, but everyone in the room in whichever way that you do interact with bladder cancer patients to do that. And once again, amazing work from our member patient organizations, especially Laura. I liked your reference for the TripAdvisor for hospitals. I thought that is a fantastic reference to put it in simple terms, and I have no doubt that will have an amazing impact. Now, I would like to just bring up a slide. I have the closing slide, nothing I'm just going to bore you with. We have virtual networking available right now. So once you leave on the left-hand side, if you click networking, you'll be able to meet someone new, hopefully you haven't met before, from anywhere in the world who have attended the sessions today. It's a one-on-one 3-minute speed networking sort of setup. So we will be staying behind, and I hope you do. And it's set to be a really exciting opportunity for us to see each other virtually. Next slide, please. I would like to also thank our sponsors and our strategic partner, Society Internationale d'Urologie, International Society of Urology, who has been our partner for the past year. And of course, our premier partners, Astellas and Seagen, as well as our sponsors, Pfizer, Merck, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Roche, without whose support the event today would not be possible. And lastly, I would like to say thank you to all of you. And I look forward to, if we could just change the slide. Yes, I would look forward to seeing you all next year, hopefully in Paris and in person as well as online on September 8, 2022. So I invite you to save the date already, and we'll follow up with details in due course. And now, please do take this opportunity and the advantage of the networking opportunities, and I hope you will meet others from our bladder cancer patient community around the world. So thank you.